Hello. You guys ready?
Yeah.
How do you say ready in Russian?
Готовы.
Готов. Okay, so my name is Ahmed Sidky, and to help with the translation of Keystone habit, this is a keystone. Okay? Now, does anyone know what this is called in Russian?
Краеугольниками.
Whatever he said is right. Okay? Whatever he said is right. So anyway, a little bit of background about myself. I started my career as a developer, and still am a developer when I have some free time. And after doing that for a number of years, I did my master's in requirements engineering, so very traditional software engineering. And then I did my PhD in Agile development because I was sick and tired of traditional development. Since then, I've wrote a book on Agile called Becoming Agile in an Imperfect World, and I help organizations transform and become more agile. But anyway, let's meet Jack. Say hi to Jack. Hi, Jack. Okay. So Jack has Jack is the CIO of Future Corp, and 10,000 people in the organization, 3,000 in IT, and Jack has the goal of becoming agile. Okay? Now, here's Jack's plan. He says, I'm going to start training people across IT on Scrum, because I know Scrum, and Scrum is popular, and that's the kind of training we found. So we're going to train everyone on Scrum. He picked someone from the IT organization. Her name is Stacy. And he said to her, you're in charge of the Agile transformation in addition to everything else you need to do. Okay? They launched 2 pilot projects. They were doing Scrum, and they were successful compared to everything else in the organization. So he said, we're going to do Scrum across the entire organization. And he sent out a memo or an email. He said, by the end of the year, everything will be Agile. Any questions? That's a good plan, right? The plan is to launch 5 new teams every quarter, and the CIO is meeting with Stacy to make sure that we are implementing 5 new Agile teams every quarter, and they bought an Agile tool to make sure that everyone is consistent in their Agile implementation. Good? Does anyone know this plan? Does this look familiar? It's your plan? It's your plan, okay. Are you Stacy or Jack? Stacy? You are Stacy, okay. Any other Stacys in the room? Okay, good. So I don't believe this will work. Let me start by saying that. Yeah, I don't think this is going to work. So what we're going to talk about today is really not just Agile, but organizational agility. And here's the definition of what organizational agility is from my point of view. Organizational agility is a culture. It's not a process, it's not a methodology, it's a culture. This culture is based on the values and principles of Agile, which we'll talk about in a minute, right? It's supported by the organizational ecosystem. By ecosystem, I mean these things: leadership, strategy, structure, process, and people. Okay? And then manifested through personal and organizational habits. And we're going to talk about that. The rest of my talk, we're going to talk about each one of these: the why, the how, and the what. Okay? That's the talk. But before we go deep into the talk, let's talk about being agile. David, in the keynote right before me, talked about, you know, the dogma of doing agile. People just doing stand-ups, doing iterations, doing whatever they're doing. I want to talk about being agile. Now, I'm not agile personally. I can't jump right now and do stuff, but I'm going to give you an example based on a model called Shu-Ha-Ri. Do you guys know Shu-Ha-Ri? Okay, excellent. 10 of you know it, and the rest don't. So Shu-Ha-Ri is a model for learning new things, and I'm going to give you an example, okay? So this is my second time in Moscow, and both have been in winter. Do you have warm weather around here at any point in time? When? And please invite me during warm weather. I grew up in Egypt. I'm not used to this. But when we look at an example of driving, so when I arrive at the airport, if I were to ask someone directions from the airport to my hotel, and someone were to tell me there's 5 different ways to get from the airport to the hotel, and they tell me all 5 ways, they want me to be agile. Did they help me or confuse me? Right? If you don't know anything about a country and I give you 5 or 10 different ways to do something, I actually confused you, not helped you. What do I need? I need a taxi. That's what I need. I need someone to take me to my destination. I need one way, or I'll put my GPS on, right? And when I put the GPS on, I obey. Whatever it says, I say, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, and that's it, right? That's called shu. Shu, which is following precisely without any modification. Now, let's say I come more often, during summer, hopefully, okay? And we see that there are 5 different ways, and depending on the time of the day, I know which way to take. So now I have options. You know when the GPS says, do you want option 1, option 2, option 3? If I don't know, I don't know. But if I start to understand option 2 is better because it's 12 o'clock or 3 or whatever, I am now shifting between different techniques based on the circumstances around me. Make sense? And then there's re. Re is when you're just driving. You're eating, you're smoking, you're on a phone, you're doing whatever you're doing, and you're just driving. You're driving from home to work. No GPS is on, and it's not just that no GPS is on. If there's traffic, and I've seen how you drive in Moscow, okay? You take this road, you go into this neighborhood, behind this building, under this tunnel. You are creating new techniques as you go. Why? Because you need to get to the office at 9. Make sense? So you may go on roads you've never taken before and still get there. That's re. You're creating new techniques. Now, question. Where does agile or agility live? Shu, ha, or re? There's a hint. There's a big red arrow. Where does agility live? Say it. Okay. Only half of you said it. Where does agility live? Okay. You guys you're not interactive today, or what's happening? Oh, you're Russians. Okay, you're Russians. Okay. I did not say that. He did. So I believe agility lives in re. I believe there is no agility in shu. Where's the agility? Where's the flexibility? I have one set of directions, right? If there's traffic, I sit in traffic. No options. In ha, there's options. There's not agility. There's option 1 or 2. If both are stuck, I'm stuck. Agility for me lives in re. It's the ability to create new techniques as you go. But here's the challenge. Can you start in re? Can you land in Paris for the first time and say, I don't need a GPS, I don't need a map, I know where I'm going? No. You can't do that. So you have to start in shu, and unfortunately, people get stuck in shu. They learn Scrum, and now you have to be flexible by using Scrum. How? Right? And if you do anything else, you're not flexible. That doesn't make sense. If we talk that agile is equal to flexibility, then how can you be agile, how can you be flexible by only following one approach? It doesn't make any sense. But what we want to do is start here and move quickly beyond that to ha and to re, where agility really lives. Make sense? Now, this was sort of an introduction to make sure when we say the word agile, we're not thinking about iterations or Scrum or XP or any methodology out there. We're thinking about the ability to be flexible. Now, the question is, why do we need that? Right? Why do we need that agility in the first place? Now, David mentioned this in his talk a little bit, but let me emphasize this. There's a difference between work. We all go to work, but what kind of work are you workers? Are you task workers or knowledge workers? Hello? Interactive. What kind of workers are you? Knowledge. You're asleep, that's what you are. Okay, or you're hungry, I don't know, maybe. You're knowledge workers. Task work is work that you usually do by hand. You're not thinking, okay? So the big difference between task work and knowledge work is task work is work that does not need a lot of thought, okay? Knowledge work needs a lot of thought, and I want you to notice this picture. Task work is a linear way of thinking. I need to, when I build a building, I can't start with the top, right? I have a process I need to follow, and if I don't follow the process, I don't get a building, okay? But if you're writing a book, it's a very non-linear way of thinking. Now, here's the interesting challenges we have as knowledge workers. If we look at the world and the spectrum moving from the industrial age, the age of factories and task work, to the knowledge age, here's what's really changing for us. Number one, the outcome is not known, right? Not even not known, not knowable. And there's a big difference here. In task work, when I didn't know how the building looked, I created a prototype. I create a model. I create a 3D model until we agree on how the building will look, and then we go build the building, right? The problem with knowledge work is you can't do that because it's thoughts and ideas. Have you ever tried to write something before? An article, a book, a long email, anything? Okay. You know those long emails that no one reads, but you have to get it out of your system? Yeah, okay. When you write anything, it's interesting because you know what you want to say, but you don't know the words till you start writing. And it doesn't matter how much planning you do up front, you will never know the words till you start writing. And when you start writing the words and read the words, you change the words, right? So that's this. The outcome is not knowable in advance. Number two, the outcome is based on intangibles, which means the cost of change is low, right? You remember when we wrote on paper before computers? Yes? Do you still write on paper sometimes? Anyone? Okay, good. Now, when you write something on paper and you read it and you want to change it, you think twice. There's a cost of change. I have to tear the paper and rewrite it. But on word processor, you don't think twice. What do? Copy and paste. Unless you're really lazy, okay, that's a different discussion. I mean, it's just the cost of change is very, very low. The third thing that you need to understand, and this is very critical, is you cannot coordinate or control the development process. I can't tell a developer, think creatively now, quickly. I can't tell a tester, last time you found a test in 2 minutes, find it again in 2 minutes starting now. I can't do that. I can't. But you can do that with task work. You can do that on an assembly line. Okay? Now, here's why this is important. Because there's a mindset when it comes to uncertainty. All these three things, what they're doing is increasing the amount of uncertainty we have. We don't know what we're building till we build it. We don't know how much change will come our way because it's changing all the time. And we cannot coordinate or control the people that need to develop it. Shoot me now. I mean, if I'm the manager, just shoot me. Because I don't know what to do. So there's a huge amount of uncertainty. Are you guys with me? I can't hear what's in your ears, but I hope you guys are with me. Yes? Okay. For all I know, you may be listening to something else at this point that I don't know. Anyway. Every once in a while, give me a thumbs up, just so I know we're feedback loop. Okay, good, good. What is your established set of attitudes and behavior when it comes to uncertainty? And what do I mean by this? When you don't know, what do? You try something, you think. Now, before you answer this question, let's actually take a deep dive for 5 minutes into psychology. Okay? So I'm going to introduce you to the work of Dr. Carol Dweck from Stanford University. She wrote a book called Mindset. And in this book, very important book, does not talk about IT at all, okay? Talks about psychology and the idea that people have one of two mindsets, fixed or growth. Let me give you an example. People with a fixed mindset believe that what they have cannot change. For example, if you ask me, Ahmed, can you sing? And I say, no, I have a horrible voice. Then I have a fixed mindset. I believe that my ability to sing is fixed, cannot change. When I was born, I have a bad voice and that's done. But if you ask me, Ahmed, can you sing? And I say, I've never practiced. I'm sure if I practice, I'll get better, a little bit maybe, right? So I believe that my ability to sing can be continuously developed. My true potential is unknown and unknowable. Now, why is this very important? Because who here has kids? Anyone has kids? Kids? All right, good. So when I first read this book, as a parent, I was very scared. Because as your kids are growing up, they're not born with one of these mindsets. But it's how you raise your kids. You develop one of these two mindsets for them. And I was using all the language that developed a fixed mindset for my kid. I was a great parent. Now, what is this fixed mindset? It says when people believe that their potential is determined and cannot change, they avoid failure. They want to look good. By the way, both of these people want to succeed in life. They are both ambitious people. This is not a winner and a loser, no. All right? But it's how they approach that's very different. When you look at people with a fixed mindset, this second bullet point is very important. They have a constant desire to look smart. Okay? Because if I believe that I can't change what I have and I want to succeed, I need to demonstrate my intellectual ability, right? I need to look smart. Therefore, I avoid failure and avoid all challenges. Uncertainty is not my friend. Why? Because there's a high risk of failure with uncertainty. Make sense? So I stick to what I know. If I know how to do it, I stick to it. I don't want to innovate. I don't want to try new things. And therefore, I don't like feedback. Now, if you avoid failure, you stick to what you know, you don't accept feedback, you don't change. Therefore, enforcing and reinforcing the idea that I can't change. Now, the growth mindset looks at the world very differently. They believe that what they have can be developed. So therefore, they say, I want to continuously learn. I know I'm not perfect. I want to continuously learn. I love uncertainty. Why? Because it's an opportunity to learn something new. They don't think of failure. What do they think of? Learning. Okay? So do you think they like feedback? Yeah, bring it on. Now, just like individuals have this, teams have this. Have you ever seen a team where things are not going good, but it's all green on the outside? Status report green, okay, no problem. And everything inside is horrible. And you hear the manager say, don't tell anyone, our problems are inside. When we report out, we need to look good. It's not about learning, it's about looking good. Now, why is this important as we talk about the agile mindset? Because when you have uncertainty, the fixed mindset approaches uncertainty by trying to fix things up front. So if I don't know, I'll come up to you as my boss and say, tell me what you want me to do. I don't want to think. Thinking is a risk. I'm serious. Thinking is a risk. How many times have you heard this statement at work? Just tell me what I need to do. Many times, right? Why? Because people don't want to fail. If you don't tell me what I need to do, then there's a possibility that I'm going to do something you don't like, and therefore, I will fail. So these languages we use at work are very indicative of which mindset. Now, the agile mindset says, if there is uncertainty, let's learn together quickly. We don't know. Okay, we don't know. Let's not try to fix things up front, but let's try to learn together quickly. You guys you know prototypes? Prototypes, yes? Yes? Okay. Prototypes, fixed mindset or agile mindset? What do you guys think? Agile, raise your hand. Fixed, raise your hand. Who wants to go to lunch, raise your hand. No? Okay. It's interesting. Prototypes are a discovery tool used with a fixed mindset. Think about it. If I don't know, what is the goal of a prototype? Go back and forth, feedback, right? Till you say, this is what I want, fix it, let me go build it. It's still trying to fix things up front to reduce the risk. Not by learning, but by confirming, by putting it in concrete up front and saying you can't change it later. Which is really against the essence of knowledge work, because with knowledge work, every time you see something, it triggers new ideas. Have you ever developed something, show it to the customer, and they said, perfect, no changes? Never, right? Mostly. Why? Because the moment you show them something, a new idea comes in their head. So, let's take a look at a simple practice like iterations. How many of you do iterations? Some form of iterations, good or bad. Mini waterfalls. Okay? Take a look at a fixed mindset to iterations versus an agile or growth mindset to iterations. Take a look here. Both of them are working like iterations, right? But what do you see up here? Up here, I cannot start until you tell me exactly what you want. And then I'm going to go build it in small pieces. And you will give me feedback about small pieces. But the feedback is to validate what you thought you knew. Let me repeat that. Here, when I build this, you imagined you wanted this, so I went and built this, and the customer is supposed to say, yes, this is what I imagined the top of her head looking like. Good luck. Down here, we start what I think is real. The customer doesn't know exactly what they want. They're discovering with you. And I've dealt with a lot of customers and put IT people with them and say, do you actually know what you want? They say no. And the IT people was like, what? What about these requirements? I said, well, you asked me for a document, I gave you a document. It's process. But you said you wanted that? Maybe. Let's see. They want to discover. That's the nature of knowledge work. So here, the goal is discovery. But I want you to notice something. And this happens with a lot of Agile teams. If you produce an iteration that looks like this, and you show it to the customer, and the customer says, no, this is not what I want, was that iteration success or failure? Success. If you have the right mindset, you and the customer, it's both. It's not one side. Because now the customer will say, no, that's not what I want, but let's try this. So we're learning together. This is the theme I wanted you to get. Now, when I talk about the why, remember we're talking about organizational agility. The why, the essence of the why is because we're in a different age today. Most of human history has been focused on task work. Most of agricultural, industrial, even hunting, right, is all based on task work. Suddenly, in the last few decades, the world has shifted to a knowledge age, but we are using the tools and techniques of an industrial age. So this is the why behind why organizations need to shift. Now, the Agile Manifesto, you've seen it before, yes? If you haven't seen it before, then you were asleep in the opening session, just so you know. The Agile Manifesto is how to manage uncertainty using an Agile mindset in the software domain. That's what it is. That doesn't mean it can't be applied outside, but that's what this thing is. And when you look up on these things right here, it's not about the words, but I want you to read it like this. These things will allow you to learn and discover quicker than these things. Individuals and interactions in knowledge work will allow you to learn and discover more than processes and tools. Working software will allow you to learn and discover more quickly than comprehensive documentation. Make sense? It's all about learning and discovery. And when you think about that, then you've achieved the understanding of what Agile is about. It's about efficient learning and discovery. So here's my definition of Agile. Agile is a mindset that in the software world is established by 4 values, guided by 12 principles, and then manifested through an unlimited number of practices. Unlimited number of practices. And Scrum is a bunch of these practices bundled together. Extreme programming, the same thing. And unfortunately, because people love task work, they want a process. Tell me how to do Agile. You can't. No, just tell me. Stand up, 15 minutes, write stories, and put it in a tool and do iterations. But that's doing Agile, not being Agile. Make sense? Okay. So when we talk about an organization now, right, we talked about the why. The why for organizations to successfully transform and scale Agile, they need to understand that this is my spectrum. People that see Agile as a nice to have, it's a process, it's a good, efficient process, maybe use it, maybe not, they will not successfully transform to Agile. My experience. When they view Agile as a necessity to the survival of the organization in the next era. When I talk to banks, when I talk to oil companies, when I talk to telecom, most of these organizations were born in the industrial age. Now they need to shift to compete in the knowledge age. can they successfully transform? The number one motive for successful transformation is for the executives to understand that they're not shifting because of something bad or wrong that they're doing. They're shifting because the world is shifting. When the largest distributor today is Amazon, a software company, right? More than Walmart. More than Walmart. Think about that. The largest music store in the world is iTunes. Software, software, software. The world is shifting around us. The how. How do we get there? This is the organizational ecosystem. You have leadership, strategy, structure, process, and people. Culture is a rubber band that's surrounding this. Here's what most organizations are trying to do with agile transformations. They're pushing the process piece. That's it. Go do agile, right? And all that's changing is process. Is that sustainable? What happens when this change goes away? The rubber band pushes everything back to the way it was. Make sense? Yes? No? Okay. These are some statistics around the importance of process alignment. The greatest organizations in the world have one thing in common. They have an aligned culture. Even if it's all waterfall, command and control, it's aligned. Everyone believes it, understands it. The process, strategy, structure, beliefs, habits of people are aligned on that. The number one barrier to agile adoption in the past 6 years has been the ability to change culture. People don't know how, especially IT people. Because we're not used to touching culture in the first place. We have the weirdest culture in an organization. We are geeks. That didn't translate, huh? It translated? Okay. Geeks? No? Whatever. Okay. So what you're trying to do is transform an organization that has one mindset to an organization that has another mindset, right? And here's what I see a lot of organizations doing. They try to push the process piece, okay? And they try to push it harder and things come out of alignment at this point, right? Leadership is saying one thing, process is doing another thing, the measures are a third thing, and they can keep pushing harder and harder and harder, and theoretically they may get there. I've never seen an organization do this successfully. I personally have never seen it. But here's what I've actually seen sometimes work, which is one team goes out and does agile. Okay? That whole team, its leadership, its strategy, its structure, it's contained and they succeeded. And they may start to pull other teams towards it. But remember, the organizational culture is not aligned here. Meaning, at any point in time, this rubber band could push things right back. It's not sustainable. At some point, the organization is complete chaos. And that may be okay. Because at one point, the majority of organizations may come to become more aligned on this new way of working. Now, I've seen this fail when IT has a small influence, and I've seen it succeed when IT has a large influence. So it really depends on your organization. But what we need to start thinking about when we talk about transformation is how do we move the entire triangle without stretching any part of the rubber band? And that is basically by looking at two things, human elements and non-human elements. Now, for me, it's quite ironic that as an industry that talks about human, individuals, we are more focused on non-human elements than we are focused on human elements. Have you guys heard of SAFe? Scaled Agile Framework? Dad? Yeah, okay, some of these. It's ironic that so many of our discussions and methodologies are all focused on strategy, structure, and process. What about the people? If this is really a mindset, if this is a different way of thinking about work, what are we doing for the people? and we're not doing much. We need to move the entire triangle together. So what we want to do is take the entire triangle, the people mindset, the strategy, structure, process, and move it one step at a time. One step at a time. And successful transformations, business transformations over history have shown that it's about taking 1,000 people one step, not about taking one team 1,000 steps. Let me repeat that. Successful transformations come when you take 1,000 people and move them one step, not take one person and move them 1,000 steps. You can't take one team and make it super agile and expect everything else to fall into place. But you can take everyone and establish one new cultural habit, and you will see sustainable change. And that's what we're talking about here. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay, good. All right, so you get the slow animation, and it's supposed to be slow. You remember this picture? Take this on an organizational level, and you'll see the exact same thing. The team-based approach is a linear way of adopting Agile on a larger scale. The process-led is also a linear way. This culture-led, because you take the entire organization through iterations, recursive change, continuously. It never ends. There is no end state. So as we wrap up, we're going to talk about habits. So we know why we're doing it, right? It's because of the knowledge age and the age of innovation. How many of your organizations talk about innovation, innovation, innovation? How many of them have a culture that allows failure? Okay. Point taken. What are habits? This is a great book to read by Charles Duhigg. It's called The Power of Habit. All right? Habits are things that you do not do consciously, automatic. Okay? Things that just you do automatically. And there's an actual process for habits. There's a cue. Something happens, and the routine in your head kicks in, and you do the habit. Okay? It's very simple. Now, organizations have habits, right? This is how work really gets done. When there is an impediment, you don't go and look at the process manual. What does the process say I need to do? You know what you need to do. You know by experience. When a new person comes into the organization, right, they learn the habits of the organization. They don't learn the process. That's what they read, right? So what we're looking about are the habits, the things that the organization pushes people automatically to do to succeed. And people have habits as well, right? You have work habits. When you need something, do you send an email or do you call? That's a habit. There's a cue, you need something, there's a routine you do, and there's a reward you get. The reward could be, now it's on their plate, it's not my problem anymore, right? Or the reward could get, I got someone on the phone and I'm actually solving something. Totally depends on you, but it's a habit. Remember what a keystone is. Now we're going to talk about keystone habits. The keystone is the one stone that holds the entire arc together, right? So what keystone habits are the following. They are habits that generate more habits. Because if you look at an organization, what habit do I start with? Right? If you're with me, if you agree with what I'm saying, that we're going to change habits, what is the first habit that we change with? I don't know. There's 10,000 habits we need to change. What do? You look for the keystone habits. The habit that you can change that will change automatically more habits with it. Right? Did you guys get this? So I'm going to tell you some keystone habits from my experience. Okay? The first keystone habit, the most important keystone habit from my experience transforming companies is to establish a culture, a habit of communication and collaboration. And this is so easy to write on a poster and say, communicate, collaborate, but but people don't do it. People do not value collaboration. People do not value spending time understanding your point of view, understanding my point of view, and collaborating to come up with something that we both agree on. That's collaboration. Not, I heard you, okay, ignore you, we're going to do what you said. That's not collaboration. Communication. We don't communicate. We send emails to each other. That's not called communication. So we want to establish a habit of communicating and collaborating. Then we need to establish a habit of working in a non-linear way, in an evolutionary way. Remember that non-linear way of thinking? Then we need to establish habits of integration. And I'm not talking about continuous software integration. I'm not talking about that. Everything integration. If you've ever written a proposal before and you divided it for people, if the last day before the proposal is due, you start to integrate all the work, it's a disaster. You need continuous integration. That's the nature and a habit that's needed for knowledge work. And then the habit of gathering feedback at multiple levels. Now, here's a little picture from my point of view where to start. You start through collaboration. That's the first habit you want to establish. Then you start with this habit of working evolutionary. Are you guys taking pictures of me? Hold on. No? Okay. And you don't stop. You don't stop. There's always a new habit that you need to introduce in the organization. But think of all the things that you've done with Agile teams or whatever you want to call them. And the one thing that I have seen that people come back and say, this is the biggest benefit we got, was around this. And it's the hardest thing to establish sustainably in an organization. So you want to start with that. Because people by nature just want to come up to you and say, just tell me what I need to do. And that's it. Here's a picture. This is how a typical organization looks. This is my best way. I am not an illustrator by any means. But this is how I want to show you these habits in action. This is how a typical organization looks. You have silos. Yes? Keep coming with me. The lunch is coming, okay? You have silos, you have people, you have some communication lines, and you have work streams that are done in a linear manner. That's current organizations. The first thing you want to do is sort of dilute the silos. You can't break them right away. They're too strong, okay? But what you want is to dilute them, to make them appear faded in the background and establish more lines of communication, because communication breeds innovation. Communication breeds innovation. And I'm not talking about an iPhone or a tablet. I'm talking about day-to-day innovation. Creative ideas to solve problems. That is re-level driving. Remember, when you're driving at re-level, that's what you're doing. You're innovating. You're creating new techniques to get around traffic to get to work. That is the innovation we are missing in our organizations. We talk about big innovation, but we need day-to-day innovation, and it happens through communication. Then, once you've established this communication, you want to stop this linear way of working and establish a more non-linear way of working. Okay? Third is integration. Now you start to overlap these silos. All right? You can't have a 10,000 person company with one department. It's not going to happen. Okay? But you can design organizations in a way that there is constant integration between not just the people, but also the work streams. So you have less work streams at this point because there's more continuous integration happening. And then you really continuously include customers and outside people to gather this feedback. And again, this is not step one, do this, step two, do this, right? But this is a prioritization of habits. So you can start sort of in a cascading manner, but this has just been my experience. And this is how I actually create roadmaps for organizations. I say, here are the habits, here's the 5 elements of the organization. What are we going to do about leadership to help them become more collaborative? I don't know. It's hard. But when it comes to these 2 columns, people and leadership, there is a fair amount of education that needs to happen. A fair amount of education. So this is what I start with, and again, you'll have these slides, okay? But this is where I start with to say, okay, let's design an organizational roadmap to establish these habits. These are some examples from real organizations I've worked with. Please do not copy and paste these. They will not work for your organization. All right, these were tailored. These are real-level customizations for organizations. But just to show you how they look, and people divide them into different ways, and that's totally fine. When I talk about education, I want to show you the difference between being agile and doing agile for 1 second. This is a typical 2-week iteration, what most people call Scrum, okay? These are your typical practices. I want you to look at how much white space there is. A lot. That's being agile. That's what you do outside of the daily stand-ups and the practices that you do. It's how you think about work. And for me, that's the being agile that needs to be established in organizations. And that is established through habits. What most people focus on is the doing. Let me take you through training, tell you how to do daily stand-ups, iterations. That's easy. Read a book. But what's not easy is to change how people think from a linear way to a non-linear way, about every discipline out there, about how leaders lead non-linear organizations. That's not easy to teach. So anyway, Dima showed you guys this before, right? This is the IC Agile Roadmap. And the reason I show this at this point is education is the missing ingredient in sustainable agility today. Because all we're focusing on is strategy, structure, and process, not education. And think of this. If you have the best strategy, structure, and process in place, but people have not changed the way they're thinking, do you have sustainable agility? No, you don't. But if you have people, if you have leaders, testers, developers, coaches, managers, business people that think in a different way, they will create constantly evolving strategies, structures, and processes to meet the continuous demands of the business. That's organizational agility. So, with that being said, meet the new Jack. This is his new plan after attending this session. Jack's going to start by educating everyone first on the Agile mindset to explain why this is critical. Because if people don't get the why, it's just another process. Then they're going to create a cross-functional transformational team, not Stacy. They lay out a roadmap for establishing these Keystone habits. They create an educational program, including leadership, to start educating them on how to be agile so that they can align with whatever's changing. They create a program to align strategy, structure, and process with these habits. And then they establish a measurement system to give insights of this progress, and they continuously adapt. That's how we believe that sustainable agility will become in organizations. So, I think Dima talked about this in Russian. I really didn't understand it, but this is the code you need to put for this session. Yes, take pictures, take pictures. If you go to this URL, just put this code. What we covered today is really talking about the mindset and putting Agile in the bigger context. Okay? So, folks, thank you very much. This is my contact information. I appreciate it. Hi. And I don't have so. Okay, go. But you still need to speak in the mic.
Okay, hi.
Yes.
I work for a small startup company, as you see from my, just about 200,000 employees. So what can be the role of, I mean, you speak a lot about the organizational changes, which are taken usually from top down.
Yes.
So what is the role of team members or Scrum Masters in this whole process? I mean, you can't change the whole culture away, even if everybody seems to try it all the time to do Agile,
Yes.
not to be.
So the role of an individual Scrum Master or a team, when we talk about organizational transformation, the reality is it's a role of influence and awareness, but the reality is I don't believe that this scale of transformation will happen at any point except when the executives get involved. This is my experience. This is my real life experience, because I've worked with teams and they've done great stuff, but there's a ceiling. There's a ceiling, because part of that culture change is leadership changing. And that's the hardest part of a transformation from my point of view. So what I've seen successful teams do is they can transform the team. Remember that model where the team goes out? I've seen that, and that has been successful in attracting other teams and attracting leadership's awareness. But there comes a point where all that awareness is good, and you need to sit down with management and have a question, big question, to say, are we committed to organizational change, or will this remain something that we do at a team level? And here's why I'm telling you this, because so many times we have the aspiration of the bottom up, the revolution, right? We will change the organization, maybe. But the reality that I've seen is you can create attraction and awareness for executives to look at this, see that it succeeds, and then you need to have a discussion with them and say, here's why we're doing this, the why, right? And is this something the organization wants to do, and at what level? Because again, this is, maybe you have different experiences, but I'm talking about big organizations. That's what I've seen. The smaller the organization, the more influence you can have. Did I answer your question? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for the talk.
Thank you.
Actually, I would like to reverse the question a little bit. Imagine you get to a big company, you talk to the executives, and you manage to give them a good strategy for this kind of transformation, and now it comes to changing the habits of individuals. So now I understand that for a big company you've got that ceiling, and at the same time you've got the floor, or the cellar, or the swamp, or
Yes.
whatever. Any advice on dealing with that, on orienting common folks towards this transformation? Thank you.
Both of these both of these go back to what I was talking about, education. And I know this sounds like a non-actionable answer, but this is really my experience. We need to educate people on what the mindset is, why this is not just another process. And executives need to understand that even if they buy into Agile, right, that it's not a process that they can mandate down, that it's something that they need to inspire people to understand, because I can't tell you, starting tomorrow you will change your mindset. I can't do that, right? And we're talking about habits and behaviors and beliefs and attitudes of people. That's where I believe education is critical. I mean, again, as executive director of IC Agile, that's my mission. My mission is to help advance the state of learning in Agile. Why? Because there's not a lot of it. All people are learning about are stand-ups, iterations, planning poker. They're learning the same stuff 12 different ways. But they're not learning the why. They're not learning, how do I act? What is my set of behaviors and beliefs and attitudes that need to change? So that's my answer. There's a massive amount of education that needs to happen in organizations. You are shifting from an assembly line mentality to a knowledge age mentality. That's a huge shift for people, huge, and it takes time.
Well, Ahmed, one more question for you. So thanks for the great talk, and we'll glad to hear in June. We'll have warm time in
Yes.
Russia. So the question is, talking about smaller organizations, relatively small,
Sure.
10 or 20 people, how would you advise to transforming from the fixed mindset to the growth mindset if the, let's say, CEO wants, but the regular developers just resist the changes?
So again, it goes back to the same answer, but let me give more concrete. So even in Carol Dweck's book around parenting, right? What do you do to change a child's mindset? Number one is awareness. Number one, the first step of changing a mindset is for people to be aware that there is another mindset. Because a lot of developers and testers and people that this is just the habit, this is how you grew up, this is all you know. So yes, of course, I'm going to resist a process that's not in alignment with my belief. But if I start to educate you that there might be a different alternative and set of beliefs that work better for the way you work, that's where the change starts. So I've seen executives get all happy about Agile and people aren't there. They mandate collaboration. You can't mandate collaboration. You can't bring people and say, talk. They'll just talk, but they won't collaborate. Do you see where I'm getting at? This is not something like the industrial age where I can say, starting tomorrow, you will all be friends. Any questions? You will all trust each other, starting now. You can't do that. It's not an assembly line. So that's again why I'll go back and re-emphasize education, education, education. Not training. Not training. Education. I mean, that's how we change kids, right? We educate them. And that's what we need to do as a shift. Sir, you had your hand up. Last question, because lunch is getting cold. And that's not a good thing. I have a very fixed mindset about lunch.
Thank you for inspirational talk. One question, it's not internal one as those which were before. Let's imagine you're running a company which is agile in your way, and then you sign a contract with another company, for example, a Japanese one, and you smash into the wall of the fixed mindset. What will you do?
So I don't believe that Agile will work when only one side of the equation has this mindset. I'll be available for questions after, but I think we need to dismiss. I don't believe that Agile will work if only one side understands it and does it. Because remember the rubber band, it has to be aligned, right? So if you look at a quote unquote team, customer and development, right? And even if you are all about learning and discovery, but they're not, it's not gonna work. So what we do is, again, educating the customer, right? And I know this is it's getting boring, the answer to the questions, education, education, but I really want you to think about it. There is no better answer, right? When you really think about it, what we're looking for is a process, a checklist. I'm gonna do this, there is none. Because this is not something you can force, neither on a customer, because I've seen people put a Agile process contract between them and the customer. It's just like putting a waterfall contract. If you put a waterfall contract and the customer wants to collaborate, do you tell them no? Do you? No, you collaborate. If you put a collaboration contract that the customer doesn't want to collaborate, what are you going to do? So I believe there's, again, a large deal of education that needs to happen, especially with the customer, because this idea of learning is on their dime. Are they willing to pay for that learning? Do they understand, do they believe that they don't know up front? That's the hardest part with the customer, because they think they know what they want. But the reality is any form of knowledge work evolves once you see something. So, folks, thank you very much. And I'll be available if you have any further questions. So. Are there any organizational announcements where people need to go? Or?
Да, проходите все, пожалуйста, на первый этаж на ланч.